Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is placeholder intro song.
Thank you for joining us for Beardy and the Beast Media Club, a full spoiler discussion into a piece of media. We fully intend to birth those spoilers for all mankind. If you enjoy what we do, please share us with your friends or join the discussion in our comments or at our Discord. My name is Drew, and he's in remarkably good shape for his age. Devin?
I'll take it.
At least your mom thinks you're handsome. Today we'll be discussing 1995's horror sci-fi Species. So Dev, what's the measurement on the Geiger counter?
Wasn't sure where you're going with. Nope, I like that. I think this movie was both better than I remember and worse than I remember.
Yes. Granted, I only remember seeing part of it as a kid. Chunk in the middle that ended with the hot tub scene.
Mm.
And the picture in that memory from 1995, when I was yay tall, is clearer than the resolution of the actual film. Nice and crisp in HD.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I really enjoyed this movie when I was younger for two obvious reasons.
what are those, Devin?
Amazing assets and talent throughout it. Overall, I enjoyed the premise of the film. I enjoyed the story the main part of the story that they were trying to tell. Though a few things that kind of jump out at me, and this is where I go better and worse. Like the overall story, I actually think it was a pretty decent overall story. But the big issues that I had with the film was Forrest Whitaker and Alfred Molina's characters were I couldn't stand them. They were just plot devices or a reason for the plot to move on, which is really annoying when you've got government spooks who should be able to do this investigation without some psychic just saying, "Oh yeah, no, they walked over there." So I found that really bad. The other part that bothered me is it was. I think the film was a little unclear with Syl. Like they were trying to make her out to be this predator, so I automatically, especially with Geiger involved, I think alien, right, or predator. And it's like she wasn't that. She was essentially an animal doing animal things. She didn't come across as a monster. I think it kind of would have been interesting if they could have played into that more.
Just to prevent us from like freight training too much on like a bunch of points.
Yeah.
I'd like to expand upon that last one, which
Mhm.
is you would have expected them to rather not what you would have expected to them what expect them to do, but the natural thing for them to have done was to either show the two sides, the balance of humanity versus the balance of like inhumanity,
Mhm.
um, or alternatively, fully committed to the animalistic side.
Yeah.
Because they could have went animalistic slash hedonistic fully as well, and they could have just portrayed it differently when a human and portrayed it differently when an alien creature when
Yeah.
transformed, like, but it would still be the same side of the same coin. It felt like the concept for Syl and like transform Syl was, I don't have a good term for it, like almost half-hearted or half conceived.
Mhm.
It almost seemed like they didn't give her time to be human at all.
Or didn't do it well, I think is almost a better way to do it. So I'm gonna just point out a couple of scenes that I noticed
Yeah.
that I think help illustrate this. And one of which is like I had to write down because it took me out so much. So I mean, we start off with Michelle Williams' version of Cell,
Mm-hmm.
right? She is just a scared kid, right? Just doing what she needs to survive. The attack on the Vagabond was her literally defending herself.
Yes.
She just happened to be that strong. So we've got that. Then we go into both versions of Sil watching TV, and they show like war scenes, and they seem kind of disgusted and put off by it.
Hmm.
So that's making me go, it's like, okay, you're not you're not violent. In any other film, that would be what you'd be getting from that. So when we have Sil in the club, just going and killing that woman, it like I had to write down, it's like, this literally makes no sense. And the only reason I let it slide is they literally addressed it afterwards by saying that, oh no, she was threatened by it. I
But even
disagree with it, but at least they tried.
yeah, they tried. It felt like a cop out. I noted
Yes.
that as well.
Because that's literally the only unprovoked, unreasoned attack that she really has. Like even the woman she tied up, there was more reasoning behind it. That was more coming up with a plan to get away than out of maliciousness.
I think one of the problems there is it they there wasn't a proper acceleration of the killing,
Mhm.
like a proper growth, and there was no continuity of it. It's like I wouldn't say that the ticket checker, who was being nice and taken care of, was threatening her in any way. And I could have pushed it off because in a cocoon state, sure, like a
Yeah,
self protection.
that one I pushed off as hungry
Yeah,
during the transformation.
but then
It
you
wasn't
see
like a
her and
malicious.
she wasn't eaten at all.
Yeah.
Um, it almost like if we were to look at an acceleration of the killings from that one should have almost been the first one.
Mhm.
A killing out of nature, a killing out of self protection, killing out of competition, and then an intention killing.
Yeah.
But it didn't have that.
No.
And of course, I wouldn't challenge this film with a abundance of strong writing, but I don't want to derail too much. It just felt like from start to finish, it was kind of written on the fly. Okay, we did this scene. Okay, so now this character's going over here. What are they doing over here? It didn't seem like it had a plan.
Yeah. I kind of would have put a pin in that because that's what bothered me so much about Dan's character.
Hmm.
Um, so
I feel it. Yeah,
I, I
it's yeah. Go on.
I feel like I feel like the premise that they wanted to go for, and I think they should have leaned into a little bit more heavily, was what if there's an alien loose, but the alien's not the threat? It's the people hunting the aliens. So we take an alien type film, and she's lost in this world with them hunting her,
Hmm.
right? And that's where I feel like they wanted to go with the film mostly, and I think that's why it kind of falls off, and that's evidence too with Fitch, just saying I'm sorry when they tried to gas her, right? Like he actually cared for her. Like lean into that more. Uh, Like even the motivation for needing to stop Syl, like it makes sense, but she's sympathetic in my mind.
It's yeah, just it feels like they should have picked a concept for Syl beyond like she's an half alien creature who is an attractive woman and
Yeah.
like throw in some Geiger imagery. And that's how like Dan felt as well, right?
Mm,
So just throwing all these random components in, it feels like a half finished film, to be honest.
yeah.
Or ill conceived indie flick.
Yeah, almost. It's one of those things that I talked about with other films too. It's like commit. It's okay to commit. And that's why I'm just like fine, like, even watching the film way too many years later. Like that's why I had to say it's like, no, it's both better than I remember and worse than I remember because there's a really good concept there. But it's just like they had no idea how to get it past the finish line. And then so they fumbled the ball along the way. Goal line, I don't know, sports ball's complicated.
No, not really. Because when they get a net point, then you win, right?
Right, right.
Um, I would have liked if it was like the entire movie was framed in a completely different way.
Hmm.
less trying to be like failing at being a cat and mouse, and showed it more either from Sill's point of view or Dan's point of view,
Mm.
and made it like the alien versus the psychic, or um, showing a girl who's tormented between like a positive and a negative nature, and like being a victim of her circumstance.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the film is strongest in my mind, when they do kind of point at those little victim of circumstance type things,
Mm-hmm.
like with her nightmares and such. Like that's where it's strongest.
And
That's
not
why that.
the first third was actually not bad at all.
Mhm.
And like they should have cut out the, was it Preston and Dr. Laura Baker romance, whatever. It was not needed, but every movie's got to have a romance line. Probably should have just cut out Dr. Stephen Arden.
Oh god, Stephen Arden should have been cut completely. He was there was no purpose for him being there.
Exactly.
There was no comic relief. He didn't bring anything to the table in any way, shape, or form. And I like Alfred Molina, but you literally did nothing. And I think they needed to change what they did with Dan Smith's character, because they literally just used him to move the plot along, which also destroyed that cat and mouse. That there was no, like, he just knew everything.
Well, it should have either been the focal point of the cat and mouse,
Mhm.
because at a point I actually was wondering in the sewer, like, didn't you have a feeling that she knew that he was like psychic or something?
Yeah.
But they didn't explore that at all.
Mhm.
So either the psychic should have been cut completely, or that should have been the cat and mouse.
Yes.
Like, it's a black or white situation with the powers, I guess you could say.
Yeah. That could have been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he just replaced all of the need for it.
Yeah, replace like any skill, like any hitman super tracking hunter guy that Preston would have shown was completely supplanted by like, oh no, she's over there.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I vaguely remember I thought this ended slightly differently than it did. I For some reason I thought they kind of hinted at it, it's like Dan sympathized with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly thought that there was a scene there where he kind of let her and the kid go. Like that's what I remember. And you have hints of that throughout, where he's talking about she's just scared. She's just acting in defense. Like he's clear about that. And then just out of nowhere, it goes like, "I've never wanted to kill something before."
Yeah, your action line.
Yeah, it's like That's not what you should be doing here. Like that doesn't fit your character. It doesn't fit what you've built up. What the hell?
It's almost like it went from like an alien concept to a predator concept.
Mhm.
I'm talking like the first ones.
Yeah,
Gotta have your fancy action line, right?
yeah.
It just wouldn't. Unlike other films that we've watched, where a conclusion we usually have is like it needed more time to breathe. I think this film rather took the room it had for granted and didn't use
Mhm.
it effectively.
Yeah.
Um, like our entire cast goes has some type of like weird dual nature that doesn't make sense. So that's Dan's. We have Preston's, who's the hitman they call in when things get inconvenient, and he's super good at his job, but like he fires one bullet and then he swaps the mag,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Oh, I noticed that.
dropping the other one to the ground. Um,
Well, that's what you do in Call of Duty, right?
Xavier Fitch goes from like intelligent, calculated but caring scientist with unknown motives to like not being able to think straight when there's a situation in the lab and he's about to burn these people alive because he doesn't realize they could just walk to the door.
Yeah. It was a forced tension in that scene. That's all that was. And not needed.
And I mean, I guess your Syl, we've already discussed, like a weird dual nature that doesn't make sense there, and not in the good way, not in the way it should have been portrayed. And then the last one is Dr. Stephen Arden, and that's where the character we say should have just been cut outright is the only one that has a conducive character that makes sense from start to finish.
Yeah,
That's not a good thing.
it's not. I mean, that's the problem though. You have a character that makes sense from start to finish, but he's also just useless.
Mm.
Like he's useless as a character. So, and again, I think with Syl, just to kind of clarify, like I think they portrayed Syl, with the exception of like the killing of the woman in the club. I think they portrayed her mostly as intended. Like I didn't really have confusions with her motivation. I had confusion with the motivation the movie is telling us she has.
Yes, that's a good distinction.
I think the idea of like I didn't mind the Laura and Preston relationship thing because it, and this is where it'd be nice to again get rid of Arden, get rid of Dan, have those two focus on it a bit more. And, you know, their relationship can kind of mirror the predatory relationship or the animalistic
Ooh.
relationships.
Okay, here, check this out. Instead of Hitman for Hire, we have a quantum lol boss level relationship here where we have a military man and a scientist lady
Mhm.
who have an estranged relationship. And then you can have that relationship mirroring on what's going on with Syl because you can do very complex things with that.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's weird because it almost felt like that was kind of there. Like it's like that doesn't feel like a stretch. Like I don't even think they need to change anything other than, when they introduce each other, they clearly know each other. Like just that would have been fine. Yeah, I think it would have been I think they would have been able to build on that a lot more. Again, I'm not sure how early the writer was this. He had 3 other films before that. I was just curious if, this was a newer project for the guy or early project.
For me, it's more about I'd want to see more committing.
Mhm,
Uh, I do notice that this seems to be a very different type of movie than the other stuff that Ro- Roger Donaldson has directed.
mhm,
Um, you know what? I wouldn't mind seeing Dennis Feldman rebooting the series as the writer.
mhm,
Like I haven't seen the other three Species movies, but there is a concept there, and it does make you wonder how much of this film was like I have this cool concept about like alien stuff, and then someone goes like, "Yeah, I like aliens. Oh, that's like H.R. Geiger. Like, let's include that."
mhm. Well,
Is
I do know sorry, go ahead.
oh, that felt insufficient and forced to me.
Mm,
It
like,
wasn't thematically on track.
for the Geiger part?
Yeah.
So, the bit that I do know is, like, the nightmare scenes in particular,
Mhm.
like the train nightmare scene and such like that. That was very much Geiger's pet project because he wanted to do it. Spent the money himself to do the train scene, like
Okay.
that demon train. That was very much him. Like they said, no, we have to cut it. And he's like, I'm doing it anyway. Here you go. Which is really cool. And I was reading that apparently there was a lot more to the nightmare scenes in general. Like apparently there was like 20 minutes plus of that nightmare scene type thing. So much like Event Horizon, where they had a lot of this nightmare scene, but editors, for whatever reason, they chose not to use that.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I kind of understand why, but I think that's where it left the mixed messages. Because, like you mentioned with Sills, like the duality, the human side versus this supposed alien predator side, they they were kind of used the nightmare scenes to say that, but not enough. Because they specifically say, what was it? Like she has the nightmare scene and then goes, "I don't know who or what I am. What am I here for?" All right, so they tried.
I think, well, they could have made it thematically match a lot more. For instance, like they should have had more details and things like in the club to showcase the human side of that, the hedonism and the like the sexuality side of like the Geiger art
Hmm. Yes.
and even mimicking it. And then they could have even been like, because she went to hook up with Buddy at first and then was like, no, I don't like this. And then, of course, it's an 80s film and he's a guy. So he's going to try to take advantage of her because that's all 80s, or sorry, this is 90s. So
90s.
only
Yeah.
half the guys in films were abusers. She could have stepped foot in the club and then they could have done parallels and been like, this is the club and people are writhing. And then it kind of morphs into her nightmare, and then she leaves in a panic, and then she comes back again later,
Yes.
and then has that encounter. Like not acceleration, but
Just the parallel works, right? Just
yeah,
having that parallel, and you'd be able to use something like that to explain why she kills that woman,
mm-hmm,
with still keeping her being, sympathetic, right? It's out of the nightmare, so it's not Syl that's doing it. It's the alien part of Syl that's doing it. That she doesn't have control over. She hulks out type thing. Like, there's an interesting concept there,
mm-hmm,
and it would. I think something like that would help tie in because I mean Geiger, so obviously we can't ignore Alien.
mm-hmm,
It would do some of those cool things that Alien did really well by having that kind of merging reality, right?
mm-hmm.
And the right because Alien, when you're watching Alien, because the design of the ship and everything kind of reminds you of the alien. Right.
Yeah,
The way the pipes are, like you just literally have no idea where the alien is. And it's easy to miss the alien because of that. And I feel like they wanted to try to do that here, but like the couple of scenes where they had the sill in like pipes and such where an alien would be hiding, it was just so obvious because they didn't have any of that obfuscation. And I think changing it to that bleeding of the nightmare
yeah.
would fix that.
And if you had been more true to form and played up the nightmare side more, it could like, and if you kept Dan,
Mhm.
um, kept Dan being a psychic, anyways, like he could experience that bleed through
Yes.
and that would make for such an interesting escape, like escape from the alien scene or escape or tracking the alien scene, because you would be seeing it through Dan's eyes as well, perceiving it through the nightmare tinted glasses.
Mhm.
It would be very interesting to see that.
It it's interesting because like, I wanna know basically who we went over this script and changed things because I think I'm suspecting they had to, or they just didn't let him flesh out his ideas. Because they hinted at that with Dan as well in the end of the film. Like, he knew, um, Arden was with Syl because he got that flash,
Hmm.
that bit of that nightmare flash. Eh, I think that's what's most frustrating about this film is like none of these changes or theories that we're saying are coming out of nowhere. It's like they're all present there. They just never explored it.
Well, exactly. And that's why I keep making like committal statements.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, nothing was explored that should have been.
Mhm.
And because of that, things that should have been important um, seem out of place or don't make sense in the context.
Yeah.
Uh, like your best one is Stephen Arden.
Mm.
Like he was supposed to be a cultural expert.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, cross culture or something.
uh, there there was absolutely no need for him. Um, like if I was set with these characters and they had to be all included to some degree, and I couldn't just kill one off at the beginning to give a little bit of motivation, I would make Dr. Stephen Arden our Cabbage Head
Mhm.
because everyone else has some type of personality or skill that seems relative to what's going on.
Yeah.
And you just have them explain all the random bits that most people don't know to Stephen Arden, and he's the proxy for the audience.
Yes, he should have been the one that, I'm in a room full you're in a room full of scientists. Do you understand this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
That would have made a lot more sense.
Would have made a lot of sense if he was a computer scientist and tell me how they could send all that supposed data with 1 kilobyte or 1/4 of a kilobyte.
That's factual.
Like the DNA strand
Yeah, I'm
and
pretty
the
sure they
map of
actually did that.
Soul.
I thought they actually did that, like
Um,
with like really bad pixel. I thought that was something mostly true.
in 250 bytes.
I mean, we flew to the moon with the computing power of a blender, assuming it wasn't faked.
It's just like 250 bytes is approximately um
Oh yeah, it's nothing.
like half a paragraph
Yeah,
or less.
I
Uh,
mean, look at early games. Look at what you get done there if you're, when people actually were efficient with their data usage. Unlike the 80 gig games now that are half the length of some of those PlayStation games.
uh, but yeah, they send a map of the human DNA, and they get
I
that.
sent an image of the structure of the DNA.
Okay.
Like they actually showed the little picture. It is like Atari level art.
Receive one back. I'm probably just nitpicking it too much simply because like so much of the other parts of the movie are just low tier that I just want to find more things wrong with it.
And I think to be fair, like when they're talking about that type of data, even in 95, like that was actually, closer to being an impressive amount of data. That wasn't too far off from Bill Gates saying we'll never need more than a kilobyte of data or a few kilobytes of data.
I'm certain I had 100 meg hard drive around then.
Yes, and that was like the largest you could get and were not cheap to get. I mean, again, like a CD was what, 600. But I mean, again, this was sent also 20 years
750.
before, but this was also sent 20 years before that.
True. Yeah, most of my criticisms of the film all just boil down to it not picking a lane
Yeah.
or a direction and going with it.
Yeah.
Because I would have loved to see more of a kind of a grim dark portrayal more in the event horizon kind of feel. Non-futuristic, but it's LA. You can show that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be hard, and go that direction, especially with the addition of the H.R. Geiger imagery.
Yeah. Can you imagine if that club was like a goth club instead? You'd be able to get so much Geiger imagery into like that kind of gothic punk subculture type club instead of what felt kind of mainstream.
I guess, yeah. The leather is important, and that's what I was kind of
Yeah.
mentioning before. The club would have been the perfect human proxy for the Geiger alien side.
Yeah.
And to show like the brutal dark sexuality of that imagery.
Hmm.
There is one thing, and I know that this is another like funny thing that I noticed. In less than a day, without moving the hobo's body,
Mhm.
without our scientist crew having arrived as of yet, they were able to DNA type the wounds from the hobo and confirm that it was indeed Syl
Oh, yeah. No, that did not slip my mind.
in 95.
Can't do that. We don't get that done today.
Anyway, if the government can fake a moon landing, then they can.
Oh.
we, for the record, I do believe we landed on the moon.
We're just saying that so they can't get rid of us conspiracy theories. Oh, yeah, there was. Yeah, it's just little things like that. Like I understand they had the accelerated timeline,
Mhm.
but the thing is, they could have. They didn't even have to change anything to quote unquote slow down the timeline.
Mhm.
That could have happened over the course of a couple of weeks or a couple of days, and they wouldn't have needed to change anything, right? It's just, but you give us these weird indications of how much time has passed, and it's like, yeah, why? Because again, it's like, why do you say it's like, oh, we've only been here for 2 days? And it's like, huh, strange. There's still not like a mass of bodies around. Is she really this hunter predator that you think she is? Spread it out a little bit. Have some weird things happening if that's the angle you're going with, or have them question.
To fix the timeline, my small change would have been not to have a cocoon scene, have her arrive in LA still as a kid, and then do like a time skip. And then you can simply say, when they're showing the video and they're discussing her rapid rate of acceleration, you just say, it was super rapid, but it appears to have stabilized, yet still been, 8 times that, or I guess
Yeah,
30 times that of regular human. So then you can explore the world more as Syl, as she's growing, and then you have your time skip, and then things will make a little bit more sense, at least for her place in the story as it was.
yeah. I think that's a good thing. It's like a good way to look at it because yeah, it makes the timeline feel vague instead of specific.
Yeah.
Like the specificity of this one is what really throws it off.
It's been 56 minutes since we found the body. We've already uh, done a complex drug test and typed it for DNA and sent its entire contents of its bowels in data form to Alpha Centauri.
And they did it twice.
The
They did it twice in the film because they did
DNA
it with
thing.
yes, because they did it with the explosions. Like, oh, but we found her thumb.
Oh, you know what? I didn't even notice that one because it seems so absurd already.
You know what else seems absurd? Just talking about that whole scene.
Hmm.
So we have the scene, the one we've already referenced with them, just putting the cells into a blank ovum to see what happens.
Hmm.
We see exactly how rapidly it grows. Cool, I liked that. They also show us how useless fire was against the thing, and then they go after her with a flamethrower and assume that a burning car killed her.
Okay. Should have been electricity.
Yes, or something.
Ah. Well then.
It's funny because like again, I was looking at the trivia and like they apparently very specifically thought it was lame for her to die in fire. That's why they blew off her head. It's like, yeah, you set up that the fire isn't going to do anything, but you tried again anyway.
On top of that, they didn't express any parasitic or takeover nature of the alien creature, or the alien, like even the alien DNA per se.
Yeah.
So the rat doesn't even make sense at all.
No, no. I just choose to think the film ended 30 seconds before it did.
Well, I kept thinking that it was going to end with there being another kid,
Yeah, something like that. That would make sense.
or the other option was Dan finding a kid and like turning the other way.
Yes, that's kind of what I thought. Like again, I vaguely remember something like that, and I don't know if I'm thinking. I must be thinking of another movie.
Hopefully, it was a better movie.
I don't think it was.
I struggle to find many things that I liked about this movie, and there was parts in it where I wanted to skip forward just because it felt like this scene is not necessary. And of course I didn't. I made myself sit through it all.
Yeah.
But it's not a good sign.
And that's actually an interesting way to put it. It's skipping it because the scene wasn't necessary. It's not even a pacing issue.
Pacing was fine
Like,
actually.
like, the pacing was fine. So I mean, I didn't have quite the issue with that, but I completely understand exactly what you're saying,
Mhm.
which is why I'm clarifying that. Yeah, the pace was fine. I wasn't drawn out that way. It was just so obvious that it wasn't needed.
It just boils down to, is this a case of we had like an awesome script that was manipulated, or production company, or what do you say, like some overseeing director um manipulating it and just like ruining the script, is we've seen like in the past, like adding in action beats where you don't need it, or changing characters or like demographics or whatever when it's irrelevant to the plot.
Yeah.
Um, or is it just a case of bad writing?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't even necessarily want to say bad writing. I want to say it felt inexperienced.
Oh, okay.
Right. And the reason I'm making that distinction is, as we've discussed so far for the last half hour or so, the elements are there properly. You just didn't string them together. Right. So all the makings of the story is there, just not the experience to tie it together properly, which is why I went and checked, like, okay, how early is this in this guy's writing career?
Hmm.
Yeah, the concept is there, and it's, again, almost on the same level of concept as, again, Alien, as Predator. Just, yeah, didn't know the pieces to put it together to make it run as smoothly as those films do.
You know, one of the other things that I thought they were going to try to play with,
Mm.
there was a line, and it was pretty through a line that was questioning like what the bad part of her was. Was it the human or was it the alien?
Mhm.
And they didn't explore that at all. And
No.
I think I think Geiger was wanting that to be played because you said that he did the train scene, right?
Yeah.
And then we also have like the alien scenes. So that makes you wonder because like I think it was almost regular looking skulls on the trains. It
Mhm.
wasn't like extended malformed skulls like you would expect from like aliens or the um the alien form of Syl. So
Yeah.
I think he was trying to play with that, but that was another thing that I think seemed to be thrown in there and wasn't explored at all.
I mean, that's something that's kind of there with Geiger's art in general too, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's that bleed over of the technology, the human elements, the organic. It's just, and it's present throughout all of his art. Yeah, I think that's what they would have. I do think that's what he wanted to explore more in films where they kind of go, it's like, oh, who is the real bad guy? Was it us or the aliens? Half the time it comes across that it's the humans that are bad guys, but they didn't.
They didn't make it a question. They just
It
went
didn't make
like,
it a
no, it was the humans the entire time.
yeah, and I mean, again, that's another thing that just pops to my mind, showing that she wasn't the monster because she had the opportunity to get rid of the people who she clearly knew was hunting her, and she just hid. She didn't hurt any of them, and she actually actively found ways around hurting them until they literally came into her where she was giving birth. Um, but that being said, it, um, just to move from the story for a bit, I don't really know how much else we're gonna get out of this. I think we're kind of circling around the point.
I agree. And the fact that you said with that being said, I was actually while talking, I've just been scrolling through Geiger
Yeah.
art.
What'd you think of the effects?
I liked what they did with Syl before the final showdown
Mm,
because when they'd show like the alien side of her and her transformations, it was only like little bits. It's almost like they were treating how much they were exposing of her like they would a proper horror movie monster.
mhm.
But I'm sorry, those effects when at the very end were just so bad. Like
Yeah.
they did not age.
No, they very much didn't. Well, with that being said, like, I don't know. I actually watched the credits, and there was like a dozen people that worked on the CGI. 'Cause, I mean, again, this is like super early CGI. So, yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of that, but the practical effects that they had throughout, I'm like, no, there's some pretty good body horror here. Like with the,
Mm.
like you said, like with that first bit of transformation with Michelle Williams, so that was really cool. Um, I know I cannot remember where I saw this, but apparently everyone thought basically that you wouldn't be able to make Sil. like because like with the see-through and transparent and such, like
Oh, yeah, okay.
right? Because and puppetry for the most part. So just the fact that they managed to do that was amazing. I almost wonder if they didn't want to go through for that see-through aesthetic, that we probably would have had that final kill scene be practical. Because I mean, we've already seen them do that with Alien.
Well, the problem there is they wanted to have the full reveal of her jumping and doing like an acrobatic thing,
Yeah.
but they never did that in Alien.
No.
When like a minimum of a third of the creature is off screen, it is so much easier to make it practical.
Yeah. I also think, the cave could have been darker.
Oh yeah, it was.
Like, if the cave was darker, they probably actually would have been able to get away with some of that CGI. Or again, make it raining like they did in Jurassic Park. They they do stuff like that for a reason. Yeah, overall, I think they actually did well with the visuals. Early CGI notwithstanding. There's cool body horror, the effects with a couple of deaths that were there, the kind of skull burster instead of chest burster that they did. I liked how the cells and the cocoon kind of had that breathing look to it as it was kind of growing.
That was a nice use of practical effects.
Yeah.
You just knew there was some dude in that flesh-colored plastic bag,
Oh yeah.
just like pushing it and making it do things.
Probably a dancer walking all backwards.
Walking backwards, but in reverse.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you pretty much see the same thing as I do. Yeah, figured it would be important to talk about because I mean, Geiger's designs again are just um,
Honestly, for a film about DNA and how how the introduction of like DNA into a human creature and then growing it, this movie at least feels like at least 2/3 of that DNA proteins have folded. That's the best I got.
that's the best you got.
That's the best I got.
Nope, yeah, I'll go with that. I can't
Actually, you
think
know
of anything
what?
else.
3/5. 3/5 of the DNA has folded.
3/5,
I give bonus points because the practical effects that they use were actually quite.
and I think, yeah, I agree. I think 3/5 sounds about right. There's so much there, and I want to put it down to almost inexperience. Is almost what it felt like, just not knowing how to tie it together. Premise was there. I don't feel like we've stretched with any of our theories or small changes like we have in some films.
Yeah, I do honestly think that a reboot with the original writer and a clarification of the concept would yield a very good movie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say excellent because it depends on how the rest is handled, but I think it would be quite good.
Mhm.
Cool beans. Fiend.
Being in